I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Humdinger rocket from Estes. This rocket is a little bit more complicated than their E2X kits, but not by much. If you've ever built the Estes Gnome, this is very similar to it, it's just longer. So we'll go ahead and open this up and get started here. So we'll go ahead and fish out the instructions, and we'll make sure we have all of our parts. Alright, we should have 2 body tubes right here. Now these do look small, and that's because this is a minimum diameter mini engine rocket, so it uses 13mm motors. Alright, we've got a sheet of self-stick decals, and then a small parts package here, and that contains the fin assembly, the launch lug, nose cone, coupler, engine retainer, and a small parachute. Now I will say something ahead of time. You can use that parachute, but in my experience, those 6-inch parachutes in minimal diameter rockets like this often get stuck, or they don't open very well. And I'm going to put a streamer in this one. Okay, so I'll show you where the parachute would go and everything if you want to do that, but I'm going to substitute out a streamer. Alright, it looks like we've got everything we need here, so I'm going to move this stuff out of the way and we will get started. The first thing to do is assemble the nose cone. And so the instructions show using some tube type plastic cement for this. Okay, so something like this. You can also use kind of medium viscosity brush on cement, and that's what I'm going to use here. In either case, you want a nice even bead, but not so much that it melts the plastic. Okay, so I'm just going to run some around there, and we're going to take this little base piece and stick that in. Run it back and forth a couple of times to seat in the glue well, and I'm going to hold this for about 30 seconds and then set it aside to dry. Next we're going to assemble the fin assembly and the engine retainer. So the first thing we need to do is measure 1.5 inches or about 3.8 centimeters from one end of one of the tubes. All right, so I'm going to come over here. Now it's a black tube, so it's kind of hard to see any markings you make. But it'll make a little indentation here. Okay, so at that mark we're going to cut a little slit about 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch long. It's going to be the width of our engine retainer hook here. So the right angle part is going to pop right into there. Just like that. And then the fin assembly is going to come down from above very tightly. Alright, and that'll go over the clip here. So because that is kind of tight, we'll go ahead and push it on here. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and dry fit this, so that should slip right in there and then become flush with the body tube. Just like that. Let's see, it looks like they've got it. Okay, it's going to be flush with the fins. So there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that back up. Okay, and what they have is a ring of tube type plastic cement about halfway down here. Now again, you could use some super glue here as well. I say again, I just finished another rocket with this. Alright, I actually prefer to use a gel type super glue here because we have 2 dissimilar surfaces. Alright, we've got the cardboard and then the plastic. So you can use the tube type cement, you can use the gel type super glue. Either one of those is fine. If you're proficient in using it, you can actually use epoxy here too, but that costs considerably more. It's also very messy. Alright, so I'm going to put this back down, make sure everything's straight, like that. Okay, and then that can dry for a little while. Now, over here on one side of the fins we have a launch lug built in. Alright, and we're going to measure 7 inches or 17.8 centimeters. I'm going to go with the inches just because it's quicker here. Alright, so up here at 7 inches, I'm going to put another mark. And that is where our other launch lug goes. So that's this here. Now if you look closely, one side is beveled as it goes around, the other side is straight. The beveled edge should be facing forward. Okay, so we'll go ahead and slip this down as well. Alright, and we're going to put some glue around there. Alright, again, the same 3 glue possibilities there. So tube cement, gel super glue, or epoxy. Alright, now here we're going to slide this down, and then we need to turn it so that it matches with the one on the fin. So you want to do this pretty quickly. Alright, so sight down both ends of it like you would a gun sight. And if those are straight, you've got it right. If you happen to have a launch rod handy, you can use that to align it as well. But I'm pretty confident of my ability to sight align that. So that looks pretty good there. Alright, now we're going to attach the upper body tube. Alright, so here I'm going to start with, let's see, we're going to start with the lower body tube. What I'll do here is find the middle of this. Alright, it's 1 inch long. Lost my pencil, there we go. Alright, so we're just going to make a mark here at 1/2 inch. Now since this body tube is very narrow, instead of trying to squirt some glue down in there, I'm going to use a cotton applicator. These are really handy, and if you don't have these already, if you're going to be in model rocketry, I strongly recommend getting some. You can also just use a Q-tip if you have that around the house. Alright, but we don't have a lot of room in here. So what I'm going to do is smooth some glue around inside. Right, but we don't want a lot of excess here. Alright, and then we're just going to insert this, kind of twist it back and forth there till we go to our mark. And we're going to let that glue dry for just a few minutes before we attach the other end. A few minutes have passed, and now I'm going to do the glue on the other end here. So I'll take the upper body tube, do the same thing here. We'll just kind of smear some glue around the inside. Now this we don't need to line up with anything, we just need to put it on. If you want to, you can line up the spirals. Alright, and I'm going to hold this in place for about a minute before we go on to the next stage. While I'm waiting for the glue to dry on the body tubes, I'm going to take a look at the parachute here. Now this is pretty much pre-made. Alright, it's a 6-inch parachute. So what we're going to do first of all, if you're going to use it, is gather all 3 loops of the shroud lines onto one finger of your dominant hand. And then in your other hand, you're going to grab onto the parachute sheet itself. Alright, and then get all of those corners to match up. Okay, so I've got apparently a problem. I think one of my shroud lines is really long. Yeah, you can see that this one's quite a bit longer than the others. And it's a real pain to have to do anything about it. You can go in and cut one end off and retie it. Or you can just use it the way it is. Or you can do what I'm going to do and replace it with a streamer. Alright, so if I'm going to do this the way it is, what we would do is gather these loops up, and then they're going to go through the eyelet of our nose cone here. Alright, pull those through, and here you can do one of two things. The easiest is actually to flop the nose cone through. So you got your loops here, and you just run the nose cone through. Alright, pull the loops downward, and then let go of this and tighten it, which I'm not going to do. The other way to do it is you take the loops and make them bigger, pass the whole parachute through, and then tighten it. I'm also not going to do that. But that's the way to do it if you want to use the parachute. Okay. Now I'm going to use a streamer, and I'm just using flagging tape. You can get this at most hardware stores. And this is an inch wide, and kind of the rule of thumb is to use 20 times the width for the length. You can go longer, but it doesn't really do much after that, except flap around. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit more. I'm going to use 24 inches. So I'll just put this on my ruler here. Alright, get 2 lengths, and we'll call it good. Alright, now for now I'm going to set this aside because we need to get the shock cord mounted before we can put the streamer on. For the shock cord, we'll need to cut out the shock cord mount, and that's on the first page right here. If you don't want to cut up your instructions, just make a photocopy of this page and cut it out, whichever way works best for you. Okay, now if you've built any of Estes rockets before, you've probably had to do this. Okay, so the typical way to do it is we put a layer of glue on here, and then we put the shock cord here. The 1 folds over onto the 2 folds over onto the 3. The drawback to doing it that way is that you've got 2 thicknesses of shock cord right on top of each other, and our diameter of this is such that there's not a whole lot of room. All right, that actually wastes some needed space there. So instead, what I'm going to do is take my scissors and cut a bit of a fork in the material. Okay, now I'm going to use my instructions here as a disposable surface so I don't get mud all over my mat. Alright, so here we're going to take our glue, and since I still have this applicator going, I'll use it. Alright, we're going to put a layer of glue here. Probably not quite that heavy, but you want this to have a nice even film of glue there. Alright, now, instead of just putting this on the 2, I'm going to fork it here. This. So now when I fold the 2 over the 3, the forks go on either side and make this not quite as thick. Alright, so there's my first fold. I want to get the air out of it there. And my second fold. Okay, and the fork pieces I can feel on either side there. I'm going to put just a touch more glue right there. Okay, and now I'm going to fold a curvature in this so that the convex surface here is what's going to go on the inside surface of the body tube. Now normally you do this with a finger, but unless you're either a very small person or a child, it's really hard to get your finger down there. So here I'm going to use another cotton applicator, and we want to get this down just about as far as we can get it. I like to have at least 1.5 inches. So we're going to slide that in, and now I'm going to use a clean applicator here to slide that down. And I don't know if this is going to show very well on the camera, and then I'm going to rest this in my hand, and I'm pressing against my hand that's underneath the body tube there, and I might even want a dowel. Alright, so I want to get that as flat as I possibly can. Okay. Now I need to let that dry thoroughly before we put the recovery system in it. However, we can, before breaking here, you can go ahead and put the nose cone on. So just put the other end of the shock cord through the nose cone eyelet. Alright, tie that on with a double knot or 2 half hitches. Alright, get it up on the top there. Alright, pull this from all directions, and then take just a little bit of the white glue or wood glue again here, and just touch that to the knot. Just a little bit there. You can kind of work that in, but that's just to keep that knot from unraveling. And then we're going to cut back the free end to about 5 millimeters or so, about 1/4 inch, so that it has less chance of getting caught between the shoulder and the body tube. And now we're going to let everything dry. The glue is dry on the body tubes and on our shock cord here. And I want to demonstrate something here. So if we were to fold this up for launch, it would look something like this. And I'm ignoring the shock cord or the shroud lines sticking out here. But the final shape would be something like this. Alright. And so we have to stuff all the shock cord down in there, and then this barely has room. And so this is why I really don't want to use this parachute with this particular model. And instead I'm going to go ahead and use the streamer. Now to attach this, I'm going to use a small piece of electrical tape. About 1.5 inches long is good. And it doesn't really matter what color it is. So I'm going to put the sticky side here about halfway down and attach the streamer to that. And then very near the top of the shock cord, okay, I'll put the shock cord on the sticky material here and then fold this over both the shock cord and the streamer so that every surface is coming into contact with the adhesive on the tape. Okay, now we need to stuff the shock cord down, and you might need the aid of a dowel or some other little tool here. It's not going to just push down very readily. Now, if you're fairly advanced in model rocketry and you've used Kevlar cord before, you could consider using a Kevlar shock cord, and I would anchor it to the coupler that we put in earlier. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. So we've almost got the whole thing in there. Now, if you are preparing this for launch, you'll want to take one sheet of recovery wadding, cut or tear that into quarters, and then lightly crumple each quarter and stuff it down in there before you put the shock cord in. I'm just doing this for storage, so I'm going to omit that step. Okay. Now again, if you're using the parachute, go ahead and fold it up and kind of roll it into a cylinder like I had earlier. If you're using the streamer, start by folding the streamer lengthwise over itself a few times here. Do not wrap it around the shock cord. It will not deploy from that type of position. Okay, and then just do this one or two more times here until we get to a reasonable length. And then you can go ahead and roll this up the rest of the way and get it as small as you can. Okay, and we're going to tuck the rest of that down in there. Okay, and then make sure that you're not getting anything caught between the shoulder of the nose cone and the body tube. Okay, let's put that on there. We're going to turn this upside down and give it a shake. Alright, so that should not come loose when you shake it, but it should be able to pull freely out with just a little bit of tension there, which this does. At last, we're going to put on the decals. Now, if we look at the package insert here, we have what looks like some really complex decals here on each section. In reality, these are two wraps. Okay, so this is all one decal, this is another decal, and these are meant to go, one will go here, one will go here, and then the Humdinger will go up here on the upper tube. Okay, it's a good idea to wash your hands before you put these on to help minimize fingerprints and such. And initially we want to put these on with just a very light touch because they do tend to stick irrevocably to the material there. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm putting this on the opposite side of the launch lug, and the illustration shows matching this up right here. Okay, so the trick is to get this as straight as possible the first time. The way it is now, it's fairly easy to pull it back up, but once it's been smushed down there, that is not going to be the case. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try for it here. Now this has actually got a clear area here that's wider than here. That means this part goes down first and this part is going to go over that if we've got everything nice and straight the way we hope we do. Alright, so I'm just carefully working my way down and squishing the decal down, preferably with a minimal of air pockets and such. Okay, and I'm going to do it from the other side now. Alright, and that actually went on pretty reasonably straight. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side of the launch lug there. Now decals are not necessary for flight. They are purely for decoration. So if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. It'll fly just fine without them. Oop, that one crinkled a little bit. Let's see if I can pull that up. Now in the case of this decal, it does kind of reinforce the joint there a little bit, so it does provide a little bit of structural integrity. Okay, and then up here toward the top, here's our Humdinger. That looks reasonably straight. Now, one thing I've found with these self-adhesive decals that Estes uses is that over time, a lot of times the adhesive along the edges will start to fail and it'll start to peel up. In most cases, I found if you put just a little bit of regular super glue in there and just push it down again, it stays down that way. Okay, and then last, we've got these little Estes decals here. I think I'm just going to use one of them on one of the fins, like that, and maybe one of them up at the top near the nose. Alright, now this is a small but long rocket. Here we go from nose to fins. Okay, in actual time this went together in about an hour. I hope you had a good time building this with me. Have a great flight and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.